Chapter 1. The Scythe-Aptisar Star System. The star called Aptisek was an ordinary yellow star, surrounded by 12 none too notable planets. The third of those planets was fit for habitation, its population just under 100 million. Though part of the united humankind, traveling a mere 5,000 settler planar miles through planar space would take one into the sphere of influence of the power the UH was officially at war with, the humankind empire of Ov. It was no flight of fancy to call the planet's position precarious. It was not, however, alone in that predicament, as many other star systems faced similar circumstances, which was the reason there was no fleet station nearby, and all that existed by the portal was an orbital fortress. When the Ov invaded, the fortress's efforts were valiant and worthy of mention, but it was destroyed before their overwhelming firepower. When the fortress's debris fell into orbit around Aptic 3, the planet's premier, Makrit Talis, thought to try speaking to the commander of the enemy fleet. As such, I shall take this chance to make our will clear to you. That is not my personal will, but the will of all who reside in the Aptic star system, as is my duty. I acknowledge that, given you and we are in a state of war, I perhaps cannot blame you for invading this system. But I say unto you, in this moment of soaring emotion, shaking as we stand, that it is the duty of a member of the united humankind to bear such strife, and that we bear that duty gladly. The premier of Aptic's speech reverberated through the commander's bridge of the fleet flagship, the patrol ship Lachka. Listening intently sat the commander-in-chief, whose hair was a blue blaze. She stared at Talis's hologram, her red eyes burning, but the only real sign of her irritation was the way her fingertips were ever so slightly tapping at the armrests. Chief of Staff Faddis was surprised. She's being so patient. He hadn't thought patience was a concept his commander had ever heard of. It may be the case that our system hasn't the power alone to break your nation's blockade over our space. Yet we will not simply sit idly by, waiting for our peacekeepers to passively taste defeat. This land is our land. The premier raised a fist. When you Ovs touch down onto the surface, I promise you we will show you what we can do. We will fight and keep fighting until our peacekeepers have expelled your fleet. You will never rule over the surface of Aptic 3. When the premier paused for breath, the commander simply grinned. From her venom-red lips came cordial words of encouragement. Please try your best. Confusion crept on Talis's face. He opened his mouth to reply, but she paid no heed and cut the transmission. I feel sorry for the premier. He spoke so passionately, but it was just such tedious tripe. Then Commodore Spore Aaron Sekpot Panesh, Archduchess of Latepan, stood up from her seat. Chief of Staff, was there any change in the situation while I was busy listening to the man? The astrospace of Aptic 3 has been totally secured, reported Kvaddis. 70% of the fuel of the antimatter fuel factory by Aptic Sun has been taken. Furthermore, our own Ayad Hoka, mobile antimatter fuel factory, has already completed 62% of its projected deployment. The 2MH propellant refueling station, to be set up on Aptic 6, has gotten 0.17% of the way there. It seems the propellant refueling station's installation will take the longest amount of time, at around 218 hours hence, so it's all going according to plan, Spore cut in. Yes. From now on, you can just say nothing's changed. Don't you agree it would be best if you learned how to get through things in life more concisely? Understood. I'll be careful from now on, Kvaddis nodded grudgingly. Oh, you're no fun, Chief of Staff, Spore frowned. What does she even want out of me? Why am I here? Kvaddis lamented inwardly, his mind turning once again to working out the contents of that letter of transfer. Naturally, he didn't actually expect to be able to send out a letter of transfer in reality. According to Star Force's tradition, a superior could not bury a subordinate's transfer request. After all, a star pilot who didn't want to be there was just a liability. In addition, the higher-ups could use the knowledge of how well a commander kept hold of their subordinates as information by which to evaluate their performance. But in the 3 years he had been under Spore's command, Kvaddis had stumbled across a startling truth. Spore harbored him no ill will whatsoever. Were she to receive a transfer request, though, she would. He would assuredly be transferred elsewhere, but only the personnel department could know when. Kvatis was loath to so much as imagine what might transpire in the period between his request and his transferal. Communications officer, call up the desk fac, ordered Spore. Before long, the commandant of the Recon Subfleet Desk Fac, Associate Commodore Rozek, appeared before the Commander-in-Chief's seat in hologram form. Commandant, are preparations for departure ready? Completely, Commander-in-Chief, Rozek replied concisely. Very good, nodded Spore, shooting Kvatis a glance that screamed you should take a leaf from his book. Be a dear and depart at once. Yes, Rozek saluted. As planned, the Recon Subfleet Desk Fac will scout out the Misirek star system. Spore nodded wordlessly a second time, and the hologram cut out. Communications officer, arrange a carrycraft for Fyac Glaherer, His Highness the Commander-in-Chief. Roger. The communications officers looked up at her. Do we have anything in particular to report? No, said Spore, shaking her head. Everything's going swimmingly. The tedium of it. All ships of the Recon Subfleet Desk Fac have set sail, reported the exploration staff officer. The humankind empire of Ov's great counterattack would commence here, in the Aptic star system, in this, the year 955 IH. It had been 3 years since the Three Nations Alliance, comprised of the United Humankind, the Greater Alcant Republic, and the People's Sovereign Stellar Union, had attacked via 2 of the portals in the Elish monarchy, one of the 8 monarchies that comprised the humankind empire of Ov. The empire had taken the enemy on and won for the time being, but they had lost large swaths of territory within the Elish monarchy to the enemy, and it had yet to be recovered. Both sides of the hostilities had sustained serious damage, and for 3 years, neither power could mobilize any large-scale forces. The best they could manage up until now was the small skirmishes that attended the recon in force of the star systems near the boundary lines of their respective zones of influence. This 3-year lull was also time enough to rebuild the fleets and gather information. By analyzing the compocrystals recovered from the captured enemy ships, the Empire uncovered where the 2 portals that had been opened up in the Elish monarchy, the Sadek Sudasakmbina Seeker, Portal 193 of Kaish, and the Sadek Gagamida Sibir, Portal 882 of Sieve, led to. From the central sector of the Milky Way portal belts all the way to its 7th ring, lay the constituent interstellar empires of the Three Nations Alliance, which had declared war on the Empire, as well as the Hania Federation, which remained neutral. In the spaces between those powers lay 7 of the 8 monarchies that made up the Empire, the exception being the Elish monarchy. Both portals 193 of Kaish and 882 of Sieve connected to a sector located between the Sio-Orgidi and Rasius monarchies, a sector controlled by the United Humankind. And so Military HQ cooked up a scheme to sever the sector from the TNA. Starting from the Sio-Orgidi monarchies Druhan Viscit or Countdom of Biscaith, they'd capture star systems such as Aptic and Miskair and establish a main supply line across them. Then they would take the star systems near the main supply line, and in so doing build a line of defense. In the end, the line would run all the way to the Lacerin-Urer, Duchy of Ware, in the Rasius monarchy. In addition, they would try to close up the now isolated sector. The name of the operation was Rainib, Phantom Flame. The composition of the Byrek Rainibur, Phantom Flame Fleet, the strategy's fleet of enactment was as follows. Ranking order of the Phantom Flame Fleet Commander-in-Chief, Imperial Admiral Avriel, Crown Prince and King of Barca, Chief of Staff. Star Forces Admiral Senek, Relacerek, Imperial Duchess, Advance Recon Corps, Byrek Kasna Rainibur, Phantom Flame Fleet 1 Commander-in-Chief, Commodore Spore, Archduchess of Late Pan, Chief of Staff, Kilo Commander Kvatis, Knight First Class. Right Side Invasion Corps, Byrek Mata Rainibur, Phantom Flame Fleet 2 Commander-in-Chief, Grand Commodore Lalame, Rue Lobeck, Imperial Marquis, Chief of Staff, Associate Commodore Tlur, Lief Sesliner, Baron of Seslenu, Nucleus Invasion Corps. Byrek Bina Rainibur, Phantom Flame Fleet 3 Commander-in-Chief, Imperial Admiral Avriel, serving concurrently, Chief of Staff, Star Forces Admiral Senek, serving concurrently, Left Side Invasion Corps, Byrek Gunna Rainibur, Phantom Flame Fleet 4. Commander-in-Chief, Grand Commodore Kopponik Rulayev Irlimek, Imperial Baron Noble Princess, Chief of Staff, Associate Commodore Saskath Rulayev, Imperial Baron Rear Supply Corps, Vireklina Rainabur, Phantom Flame Fleet 5. Commander-in-Chief, Star Forces Admiral SM, Imperial Duke, Chief of Staff, Commodore CIC, Yarluk Lacerek Gambr, Dukedom of Gam, Noble Prince. With 150 subfleets in all as their main military force, they also had 70 subfleets worth of combat ships that were part of the training fleet, in that they had yet to be appointed to specific formations, making up the rear. This time, the Imperial Star Forces had taken the front lines. Commander-in-Chief, the Star System's Premier is asking to speak to you again, reported the communications officer. His Excellency still has something to say? Spore's blaze blue eyebrows furrowed. I've lent his idle grumbling an ear already. He may not think what he has to say is idle grumbling, suggested Kvatis. What else could it be? She cocked her head in puzzlement. Fine then. Chief of Staff, ask the Premier what his business is. I'm a tad busy. For a brief moment, Kvatis stood there. Understood. Reluctantly, Kvatis turned to the communications staff officer. Send the transmission to my wrist gear if you would. Soon, video of the Star System's Chief of Government floated up above his wrist gear. Your Excellency, he said, I'm terribly sorry, but our Commander-in-Chief is indisposed at the moment, so it's fallen on me to ask how we might help you. And you are? Frowned the Premier, with an air of suspicion. My name is Kvatis, and I am the Chief of Staff here. Good, that's just what I needed, said Talus, surprising him. Before I speak to Her Excellency the Commander-in-Chief again, there's something I'd like to make sure of. What might that be? You see, I fear that your machine translation might be malfunctioning. I do not believe that is the case, said Kvatis. Besides, I can assure you we understand the words of you and your people without it. For us, using machine translation as an intermediary is merely to establish a fair playing field. But how can that be? Sniped the Premier. I made it clear on our end that we plan to resist you to the bitter end. Correct. I, too, heard you say as much. Upon hearing that, Talus's expression doubtful, his confidence deflated. Then, perhaps it is our machine that's on the fritz. Because according to it, Her Excellency issued us words of encouragement. That is correct. At a loss, Talus breathed a sigh. It's just, to put it mildly, this is a bewildering development, at least by our standards. We've made clear our intent to resist, yet the enemy commander fires back with a pat on the back. I completely understand, Kvatis nodded vigorously. He felt he'd found a kindred soul in this lander he'd only just met. In anticipation this day would come, I studied to deepen my grasp of culture, or rather, I thought I'd deepened it. You must be joking, seethed Kvatis. It appeared Spore's actions had been misconstrued as the typical Ov way. Your Excellency, I don't know what you think of our race, but Ovs, too, have individual personalities. Had it been me, I would not have given you words of encouragement. In fact, it wouldn't even occur to the average Ov to do such a thing. In that case, a shine returned to the Premier's eyes. Then Her Excellency, she's, well, I don't mean to be rude, but she's somewhat eccentric, shall we say? Caution, please, chided Kvatis, despite thinking that was the understatement of the century. I am a faithful subordinate of the Commander-in-Chief, and most crucially of all, I'm currently within her reach. Forgive me. May I ask how you would have responded in her stead? Kvatis immediately thought up a safe answer. I believe I would have said, by all means, do as you will. Talus's shoulders drooped with disappointment as he clicked his tongue. That is a problem. What do you mean? Are you aware of what an election is? I have read up on elections, yes, he said, disconcerted. Then it will be easier to explain. Talus's holographic projection leaned forward. To be plain with you, the voting public likes a leader who stands up boldly to tyrannical invaders. Oh, but I hope I haven't hurt your feelings by calling you tyrannical invaders. I mean nothing more by it than to impart a strong impression. We don't intend to meddle in your affairs, no matter what you call us. Kvatis felt keenly that he was probably getting wrapped up in some absurd scenario here. What exactly are you expecting to come of all this, Your Excellency? I would be the symbolic representative of our determined war of resistance. Of course, said Kvatis warily. Not that that wariness had ever served him before. As such, I'd like you very much to counsel our surrender. I see. Perhaps the situation hadn't been that ridiculous before, but now that the enemy was asking to be told to surrender, he had a feeling something was definitely off here. But if you reject our recommendation to surrender, then that will force us to take a certain level of action. Surrender will be demanded of your star system down the line, but at present, our fleet is intent on advancing forward, so we don't actually wish to have a hand in subduing this or other land worlds. I'm sure you can appreciate our circumstances. Yes, naturally, said Talus, nodding emphatically. We just hope you appreciate ours as well. Not adopting any measures when there's a fleet of warships overhead is going to be hard to explain to my constituents. And that is a concern? The Premier's eyes reeled wide. He could hardly believe his ears. But of course, at this rate, our numbers will be down during the next election. Ah, I see. Though he wanted with all his heart to be freed from this back and forth, still he replied, that is why we would be most grateful if you could just respond to our declaration of resistance with a strongly worded appeal to surrender. The idea being that I then accede, thinking tearfully of the lives of the people. Do that, and I'll have a narrative for the voters. Strongly worded, how exactly? Kvatis responded robotically, not really caring to hear how exactly. I'd like you to pronounce that you'll launch a savage offensive against our cities, and that is no empty threat. I'd be even more thankful if you could throw in some discriminatory rhetoric to boot. Perhaps some slurs, along the lines of land swine or mud turtles. I'm sorry, what? Kvatis was unfamiliar with such colorful terms. Land swine and mud turtles, Talus repeated. I'm certain you Azovs must have a fair few contemptuous epithets for landworlders, so you may use any of those as you like. Just make sure they're sufficiently clear-cut. It's not that my constituents are dim-witted, but there is a cultural barrier. It's not uncommon for more euphemistic turns of phrase to get lost in translation. I regret to inform you that our race doesn't find railing against people with blunt invective all that elegant. Suddenly, Kvatis recovered his senses. Hold on, Your Excellency. The star forces don't actually have any vested interest in your star system's coming elections. Consequently, we cannot cooperate with you on this matter. But apart from us, there's no other force that can shoulder the star system's affairs of state. Talus carped. Then there's nothing to worry about, Kvatis consoled him. We need not interfere, for surely your star system's people will make the correct choice. If every eligible voter were as wise as you, then they would, said the Premier, shaking his head with apparent dismay. Unfortunately, the opposition candidates and their supporters don't recognize that obvious fact. At any rate, we cannot issue a recommendation to surrender, said Kvatis. If he continued indulging this conversation, he might end up even taking a liking to Talus. Is there no room to negotiate? Talus entreated. I'm very sorry. Pacifying the doggedly persistent star system Premier with a few solicitous words, Kvatis hung up and ended the transmission. He looked up from his wrist gear and sighed. So, Spore said without a moment's delay, what did the Premier want, ultimately? Kvatis relayed the contents of their discussion. I say, said Spore, curiosity dawning on her face. That sounds far more engaging than my chat with him. A hair-raising spectacle then floated across Kvatis's mind. He pictured a Star Forces star pilot hurling childish threats at the enemy, slinging animal names like land swine or mud turtles that he'd never heard before and wasn't even sure existed to begin with. Even if, for the sake of argument, the Premier's demands were accommodated, he trusted that it wasn't a role his commander-in-chief would volunteer for. And he was also sure he knew who would have to do it in her place. Sadly, His Excellency ended up undercutting himself. I hate being deceived. As such, if he'd been honest about his intentions from the outset, we might have gotten somewhere, she said, to Kvatis's relief. Besides, she continued, inclining her head slightly, His Highness the Commander-in-Chief will be coming later. We need to leave the recommendation to surrender to him. His Highness likes this kind of occasion more than anything. In the Countdom of Hyde, well, it wasn't a Countdom when he came, but did that Star Systems administration give him a speech suggesting they abdicate their sovereignty? I'm afraid not, said Kvatis, shaking his head. Well, then he did pretty well for an Avriel. He was heavy-handed and dripping with sarcasm, but effective, though I'm sure I would have done a more elegant job of it myself. Hearing Spore say that, he glanced at the crest banner of the Archduchy of Latepan hanging on the wall behind the commander-in-chief's seat. That banner displayed a few choice words, in addition to the Gathersek Golden Crow, which was as famed as the crimson eyes of the Spore. They read, "We're not happy settling for Archduke, but being emperor is boorish work very fit for the Avriels. We are the Spores." What did the premier suggest as derogatory terms for land peoples again, she asked. Land swine and mud turtles. Land swine and mud turtles. Eyes downcast, she folded her arms. A smile curled her lips. How quaint. But they do have something of a refreshing quality, oddly enough. Please don't take to those words, longed Kvatis. Just like the majority of Avs, Kvatis was irreligious, but during times like these, he very much wished for there to be a divinity to pray to.